Well, what is going on? Welcome back to Clayton Schick Outdoors. Of course, I'm Clayton Schick. This is kind of the outdoors because we are outside. We're not exactly fishing today. I might possibly add some fishing clips in here at some point in this video, but like the title says, we're on a mission today. Will your heater kill you? Well, yes, it will. But we are doing some tests today on carbon monoxide detectors, how it would kill you in that sense and what heaters would kill you. Right now I have set up a sunflower heater in one tent and a Big Buddy heater in another tent with two carbon monoxide detectors. I'll take the camera in and give you a quick little setup here, or a quick little show of what it looks like. But we're gonna seal those puppies up for like 2-3 hours and see if we can spark those carbon monoxide detectors. I've never had any problems with the Big Buddy heater in terms of my carbon monoxide detector going off. I've never used a sunflower though, overnight, anything like that, so I'm curious to see what it's gonna do. The sunflower is the one that you have to be careful with because it doesn't have any shut off or anything like that, but let's see if we can spike those carbon monoxide detectors, talk a little bit more about ice camping safety and all that because, well, I'll get into that. Let's go show you the setup. Okay, I'm hoping my camera doesn't instantly fog because it's warm in here, and it might, but in this tent I got the sunflower. There I've got my battery with some lights at the top so I can see the carbon monoxide detector. And then of course the carbon monoxide detector right there, which is still at 0. GoPro set up on that so we can monitor the whole situation. This tent, kind of the same thing, except for Big Buddy heater on high with the exact same setup here. I guess I don't need this lighter in here. That was for the sunflower. But both tents are exactly the same. We're going to shovel out or shovel in the outside here. I can't see, my glasses are foggy. We're gonna shovel everything in here, seal up the whole tent, and yeah, see if we can get this carbon monoxide detector to spike. Okay, both tents are shoveled in. I also want to note that both of the tents are exactly the same. They're both Otter lodges with the full door. They're two identical tents. Everything about this setup is exactly the same besides the heater. So that'll be the test. And as curious I'm going to be, like say after 2 hours to check it, I'm going to let this thing go for 3 or 4 hours and see what happens. If I was really smart, I would have did the mobile app with my cell phone to my GoPros, but maybe next time. Let's let this puppy sit for 3-4 hours and see what happens. Okay, this is really interesting. We're only an hour in, and I've been coming by the shacks, and I haven't been opening them. I've just been checking and seeing. It's like, yeah, there's definitely a heater going. All of a sudden, I was like, come here. I was like, no. I was like, no more steam coming out here, and it wasn't crazy warm compared to this one here, where I could like tell. I was like, it's definitely, and you can hear it too. So the Big Buddy heater kicked off after an hour. So I opened the door real quick. Temperature reading was 0 when I opened it, so I'm not sure what it might have been at some point, but what I figure happened is the low oxygen sensor kicked in the Buddy heater and it shut off because it took me a while to get it going again. Everything's warm in there, so the heater, but Big Buddy heaters have an issue with always working in general. Sunflowers are always better in terms of like relying on it, but what leads me to this next is this shut off. I think it's a low oxygen sensor. So I just went into the other shack really quick, like opened it up, flew in there, looked. That reading was already at 100 parts per million. I think what it is for carbon monoxide. So I'm gonna go in the garage right now. We're gonna go over my phone and talk about the different levels of what it could lead to. But this one kicked off that one had issues, or has issues right now. I think I'm gonna get it to spike. I think at 300 is when that alarm sets off. So if it's already at 100 an hour in, I think in another hour it should take off. And as soon as you start to get to a certain level, it's really, really bad for you. But why I'm doing this is I want to preach safety as much as anything else. Obviously, we have a responsibility, I feel like, because people like Jay and I, Mike Klatt, a bunch of other people, we encourage people to get outside and do cool adventures. And we have obviously all done the winter camping, and we encourage people to do it. But I feel like we're also responsible for pushing the safety side of it and encouraging people to be safe. You guys need to know the dangers that are out there with this kind of stuff. And I'm gonna go over some other safety little mechanisms and stuff like that that you can have as well, or things that you should take with you for winter camping or invest in. But this is definitely the biggest one. And within an hour, we've already got carbon monoxide issues. Okay, so I found here a little thing on a chart in terms of what could happen. 35 parts per million is the maximum allowable outdoor level according to EPA. Now, obviously, these numbers are probably going to be a little bit low because they have to stay in that safety procedure, right? But increase in cardiac and respiratory complaints with constant exposure to 35. So obviously that something like that's not going to kill you, but there can be some long-term issues. 50 parts per million, headache and dizziness after 8 hours of exposure. So if you're exposed for 8 hours, so I'm guessing those sunflowers, even when you're fishing there all day, are going to be putting off some higher parts per million, right? So if you're ice fishing and not even winter camping, but have issues with headaches, dizziness, stuff like that, that's probably a huge, huge issue. 75 parts per million, fatigue, difficulty concentrating. And this is where it starts to get like even way worse. 150 parts per million, nausea, dizziness, headaches, impaired mental function after 2 to 6 hours. So this is spending a long time in it, right? 400 parts per million, 400 parts per million, hallucinations, good English, Clayton, dementia and serious headaches within 1-2 hours, risk of death after 3. So those 2 carbon monoxide detectors that I have, I got them to spike at 300, and that's when the sensor started to go off. So obviously that's when they start to get into that serious issue, right? 800 parts per million, seizures. I have to talk quicker than I can read. Severe headaches and vomiting in under an hour. Unconsciousness in 2. 1,500 parts per million, headache, dizziness, and nausea in under 20 minutes, death within 1 hour. So obviously these start to get to some like super high numbers, right? 6,400 parts per million, unconsciousness after 2 or 3 breaths, death within 15 minutes. I'm going to see how high I can get that carbon monoxide detector to, even if after it starts to beep, I'm just gonna leave it. I wanna like push it to the brink. But there's like your prime example of how a sunflower in your tent overnight could likely kill you. The big buddy heater, I was happy to see it shut off, right? The big buddies are designated to have a low oxygen sensor. So if they sense that there's not much oxygen in the tent, they will shut off. So that's encouraging. And that was at 0. So obviously it's safe, right? So you probably open a couple vents. And that's what happened. I opened the door, opened a couple windows, vents, whatever, got some air in there. That buddy heater fired up instantly again. So it's cool to see, and that was nice to know, like that one being at 100. So that one, I'll be able to tell by the GoPro if it got to anything, or it got to a level where it spiked before the buddy heater shut off. Well, I obviously can't tell right now because don't have the GoPro footage with me, but we'll try to cover a little bit of that at the end of the video or whatever. Other safety items, we'll go through some of that now. So this is a real good one right here. This is called a Garmin InReach. This is a satellite texting device. You can get a bunch of different models. You can connect them to your cell phone. You can get some different types of plans. You can get like a limited plan where you pay like $10, $15 a month. You can get an unlimited plan where you're paying upwards of like $65, $75 a month type of thing. But you can send unlimited text, so when you start to get that higher. But when you're in places where you're gonna know you're not gonna have any service, a satellite texting device is definitely recommended. Like I said, you can connect it right to your phone. You can let people know you're safe. It has an emergency SOS on it. This is a really good device to have if you're going to go into backcountry areas where you're not going to have service. Highly, highly recommend it. The next one is probably if you're in an area that maybe is a little bit more populated, but this is a beacon. Right now I gotta just change the batteries, but it's made by Otter. Goes on the outside of your tent. It's a big flag here with a beacon. And I've showed it on some of my camping videos in the past, but this thing will obviously flash at nighttime, and it'll basically stop you from getting hit by a snow machine. Another item that will stop you from getting hit by like a snow machine or something like that in the middle of the night is a reflective rope that you can drape around the outside of your tent. I had a subscriber send this to me a couple years ago, and I always drape it around my tent at night. It lights up really good when you hit it with a light. Obviously, one concern is getting hit by a snow machine or something like that at night, so you want to be super cautious. If you're in an area that's super populated with shacks, probably not as much of a big deal, but if you're on a lake, that's where people travel all the time with snowmobiles, and maybe you're not near any of the shacks, like I am set up lots where I'm kind of all alone, I'm always worried about that. Safety is obviously a concern. Like I covered a little bit outside, that I feel like it's part of our responsibility to push that safety part too. I'm happy when I get a message from a parent where it's like, my kid wants to go out and do winter camping, like what should we be worried about? And that's obviously like, I want your kid to go outside and experience Mother Nature and do this stuff, but definitely the whole safety thing is always the safety. I just keep saying safety because that's always a caution, right? Like, of course, there's a lot of other things to worry about in terms of like, make sure you go out when there's good ice and all that. Watch your weather, your winds, don't get caught out in a huge storm, which obviously can happen, but nowadays the weather forecast and all that kind of stuff will give you a huge, what's the word I'm looking for? Will give you an outlook type of thing. You can see what's going to happen. I use an app called Wind Finder to see if the winds are going to pick up throughout the night, direction, all that, pegging your tents down to, I could go on and on, but the biggest focus right now is the carbon monoxide detector, and I'll have some probably some numbers up here, what's going on in the whole process of it, but I feel like I'm not gonna have to wait much longer, and we're gonna get that one to spike in the sunflower. If the buddy heater one keeps kicking off, I'm just going to probably pull that one out because it's doing its job. That big buddy heater I know that will kick off if it gets to be a level that's not too safe, but sunflowers in the ice tent can kill you, so be careful. Obviously, if you're just fishing for the day, it's not much of an issue unless all of a sudden maybe it's midday and you decide to take a nap. But I know when I used to fish with the sunflower heater, like you would feel it more in your throat and everything like that from all of the carbon monoxide that's in the air. So be safe, safe. So I was going in and out of the house, of the garage, and I stepped in the garage and I could hear the beeping from in the garage. That means right now that it's probably at 300 parts per million. I'm gonna let it keep going. I'm curious here. Geez, this is cool. This obviously, the big buddy heater one must have kicked off again. Yeah, that low oxygen sensor on the big buddy heater. Look at 31 it's at. So I'll be able to know what we'll be able to find out on this reading what it peaks at to kick this off. But now I've got this open again. We'll fire this up. See, right now it doesn't want to really go, obviously, because there we go. Now it's going again. So this is good. The big buddy heater has a safety that will likely never ever, it's at 0 already, that will never ever kick that off with the sensor. But knowing your number that's in the tent is obviously a good thing, as well as if for some reason your safety never kicked off. But right now we're only an hour and a half in and that tent is beeping. I'm not even gonna interrupt it though. We're going to max that puppy out. We're gonna give it another bad sun. We're gonna give that like another hour and a half and see what happens. We're gonna max that baby. But this one, there's really nothing else to really test with now, because I'll know what that spiked at. at some point, or how high that got per parts per million before it finally did shut off. That one's good. Our test with this tent is finished, and now we'll finish off testing with this. We're not going in there. We're gonna let it beep for another whatever. And this is also a good way to test that, sorry for the horrible lighting. It's a good way to test that detector for a long time to make sure it'll keep on beeping. So cool. It's not cool, it's just cool that we're doing this. Okay, we've been now running this heater in here for 3 hours-ish, almost 3 hours. The detector is still going off, it's beeping. I'd like to see it go off even more crazy though right now, like it's going off like every like 10 minutes, it's beeping, it goes beep, 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 and then kind of stops again. I'd like to have it go off like crazy, but maybe if it hit even a worse level, maybe it would even go louder and more obnoxious. I'm not too sure. There you go, see, just beeping now. But I'm gonna open her up. We're gonna see what the level's at. Obviously I'll be able to tell from the GoPro what the level's at regardless, so I'm not even like too worried about trying to rush in there and whatnot. I did find another chart, which I'll put here. I found to be a little bit better chart for explaining kind of like the bad things that can happen to you type of thing. I've noticed anything like over 200 parts per million is starting to get pretty bad, so gotta be careful. These sunflowers are deadly for sure. The buddy heater, I looked quickly on my GoPro a little bit, but it looks like once it was hitting 30 parts per million, it was shutting off the big buddy heater, which is really good to know because I always run the big buddy heater and it's never like shut off of me in my tent because of low oxygen. But that's obviously a good thing to keep your vents open and stuff too, right? Like when we sleep overnight on the winter camping, usually I'm using obviously a bigger tent too, but I'm cracking open vents and whatnot. Right now I did the test with like no vents open, any windows cracked, anything like that. So let's pop her open and see what she's at. Well, there it goes again. It's gonna get foggy in here, isn't it? Holy! Instant fog. Instant. 257. Oh, it's nasty in there. Oh, wow. Wow. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, okay. That was actually nasty. 257 is what was at. The heater was like doing funny things too. Like it looked like it was almost burning in one section. I'll put that as well. I'm not out of breath from running around here. I'm out of breath from going in that tent. There was like no oxygen in there. It was insane. Like it was like, it wanted to like knock you on your butt. Instantly it was just like, you could tell it was bad, right? Like, holy cow. I understand now with the sunflower, if you fell asleep with something that on, you're not waking up. Holy, that was actually like intense, just shutting the heater off and being in there. Crazy. We'll let this air out. I'm not going in there again until, yeah. Like, yeah, are you gonna run a heater that hot and stuff like that? Probably not, right? Like we had her given her, but I wanted to do it in short order. And yeah, the thing is still going off. That's scary. Well, it's officially the next day from when I filmed that video. I wanted to kind of go through all the footage and get a little bit of like a look at it myself and get a better feeling for everything. These carbon monoxide detectors that I'm using, this is called the Kidde brand, Kidde, and on there it has a digital readout of the parts per million. In the past, I've carried one around that's just like a detector that doesn't tell you parts per million. I believe the parts per million will give you a little bit of an idea of what's going on more in your shack to keep an eye for it, or an eye out, you know, like you can monitor the levels. The biggest thing I noticed, I'd say, is that I was happy with the Big Buddy heater in terms of it shutting off at 35 parts per million. So having that automatic shut off is obviously a good thing, right? Now, don't trust that 100% though, that for sure is going to happen, but also it gives you an indication that if your buddy heater shuts off and you can't start it yourself. I was talking to a good friend, he was telling me about lighting a cigarette once in the shack. He spent like 8 hours inside with the sunflower heater, and he went to go light a cigarette and his lighter wouldn't light. It's because there was not enough air in there, no air in there. So I'm happy with it. It could be a little bit louder. It beeped at 160 seconds, and then it went every 15 seconds for the first 15 minutes, and after that it did like every 5 minutes. So I'd like to see it be a little bit louder, to be like super, to be like, okay, like let's figure something out, right? Like loud. At the same note, it would probably wake you up though. I don't know, you know what, obviously at 160 parts per million, you're starting to get to be a lot less air in the shack, right? So maybe you'd be right out of it, I'm not sure. I'd almost like to see them beep a little bit sooner, but I now believe for sure I want the ones with the digital readouts. Get the one with the digital readout. You won't regret it, in my opinion. The sunflower heater, obviously, as you noticed, was a deadly heater in two different ways. It's deadly because it seems to work more efficiently than the Big Buddy heaters do, or any type of like heater that I've ever tried. There's a new one out there I want to try called the Heater Hog. I'd like to get it and see some reviews on it and test it out type of thing. But the sunflower heater is a deadly heater, like I said, in two different ways. It usually works. It's not going to leave you without a heat source, but it could kill you. When I rewatched the video, and I purposely kept the whole thing in there of when I went into the tent, shut the heater off, came back out, I was so like, I wasn't like right out of it, but it was just like, it hit me. And like it knocked the breath right out of me, right? Obviously because there was no oxygen in there. So that's a scary situation. So I want to really, really stress and point that if you're going to go with a sunflower heater, please don't fall asleep with it on. For sure, don't overnight camp with it. They're obviously a great heater source, like when you got to get something going, and I'm probably still going to carry one as a backup, right? Because it's there. If it wasn't so loud, I probably would even have used it more in the past. So I'm glad I did that test. Other options for overnight camping, some better options would be a diesel heater that you could exhaust to the outside. You're not going to have to worry about any of that exhaust. As soon as you bring that exhaust into the tent, that's when you have to develop like a wet heat, right? So a diesel heater, you could exhaust out. The cons for that is you have to have a battery source. So there's more to haul around. You have to haul diesel with you. Diesel can gel when it gets too cold. So I don't know what the correct answer is for all of that. A wood stove, I think, would be the best for winter camping. But again, there's cons. It's heavier, more to haul around. You have to haul wood. You have to somehow set your tent up so you can hook it up outside type of thing, right? Like run a stovepipe. If I did more winter camping, I would probably go that route. Now, usually I only do like one night, maybe two at the most. But if I was going out somewhere for like a week, I think a wood stove would be definitely the way to go. Or a diesel heater, right? A diesel heater almost seems a little bit more efficient and easier than a wood stove does. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the whole thing. Obviously, I went through some safety items, whatnot. Just please be careful more than anything. Like I stressed so many times already. Get yourself a carbon monoxide detector. I picked this one up at Canadian Tire in Canada, but if you're in the States, you don't have Canadian Tire, obviously, but there's lots of different places you can get it. Kidde, Kide, I don't know how to pronounce that, and it's a carbon monoxide alarm, and then get, like I said, with the digital readout. Get more familiar with the effects from it, what could be happening, and all of that. Pay attention to some of those charts. You can just go to Google and literally search carbon monoxide chart or levels, anything like that. Go to images and you can find it all yourself. So I think that'll wrap up this video. A little bit longer than I wanted to make for a safety video in that sense, but hey, something like this needs to be out there. So thank you so much for watching, and don't forget, get outside.